How upsetting is it that James Cameron can basically just blatantly say, I did this, and everyone's like, we're still going to go watch the movie. We're still going to support you. We're still going to give you the budget.
That is precisely what I was talking about.
So it's basically like two white men still sorting out their relationship in the galaxy far, far away.
Of course, his storytelling has issues. It's from a problematic past where we don't tell those kind of stories anymore. We understand it as kind of a white savior complex.
I was like, wigga, please.
Hello, my name is Kathy Yee. Welcome to our first roundtable discussion that we're trying out. The topic is Avatar, The Way of Water, and James Cameron. I created Incluvie for all things diversity in movies and TV. It's so important to have good representation for yourselves, for other people. It really brings harmony to the country and just for people understanding each other. I wanted to introduce some of our lovely movie critics. They're very passionate and awesome. I'm happy for you to meet them. We have Richard, Yusuf, and MG, Andrew, Melissa, Atreyo, and Donna. All right, well, I'll leave you to it, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, so we're here today to talk about James Cameron, about the new Avatar movie, and just kind of continued issues that we have with representation that he has in his films. So for the people who have seen the film, what are just like your initial thoughts on like quality of the cinematography and like the visual aspect? Because I feel like that is the thing about James Cameron. That's what he focuses on. There's something that is very all encompassing and all enveloping about the world of Pandora. And that's something that I experienced when I saw the first Avatar film. And I do think that we can't discount that whenever we're talking about the other aspects. So
yeah, it is visually stunning. Like a world you'd want to live in. It's a pretty picture. Everything is gorgeous from like a visual aspect. Obviously with this huge budget, I would hope so, but I love a movie where I feel immersed in the world, right? Some of the tribes are a little consolidated for me, but the actual world itself feels very much like thought out and detailed. So I do appreciate that. I think it deserves to have like the video game made, which we were promised but never got.
A video game, they came out with the first movie, and it wasn't that great. It was absolutely unplayable.
It begins. Okay, no, go on.
Yeah. The video game feel is that, it was shot between 60 frames per second to 120 frames per second. 60 frames per second for all the action sequences. Then for the more, dramatic and character dialogue stuff, it was in 120 frames per second. So that way we could still be able to track what's going on. But it's like, it gives that smooth motion that some kind of views that we're not used to, because films typically shot in 24 frames per second, right? It works in games because a lot of like big game titles are always at 60 frames per second. So it's like, that's how we're able to get those appealing worlds, appealing look, the movements. And once we get to the big action sequences at the end, just like looks freaking incredible, right? So it's like, especially when the whale just like yeets that guy's arm off, it's like,
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So
I was in Manhattan Studios when Cameron was launching actively the production, when they were casting actors. Yeah. And it was an incredible sight. They had a tank, and like around the tank, there were people with computers. They were testing actors, and they were really like recording everything and analyzing it. So it's as much creative process as it is technological with Cameron. What we need to realize is the amount of R&D, technological research and development that goes into each Cameron's movie. To film Titanic, he developed a very special camera that could go to those like depths and film the ship. In Avatar: Way of Water, he combined the technology that he developed for filming Titanic with the technology that he developed for Avatar. What I admire about James Cameron is his ability, capacity, and drive to push the technological limits. He is the pioneer, and that's why he's valued around the world.
When you compare this movie to like Aquaman, for example, it's obvious it's being held by like ropes and everything, by like the way the movement. While if you watch Avatar, it's obviously that they're all underwater. So like when you do a side-to-side comparison about all the underwater scenes, it looks so real, looks so stunning. And that's the thing where he's pushing the limits of like the ability to like make the underwater sequences look very realistic compared to like an Aquaman. It's like, you know, almost night and day.
I absolutely feel what you are saying, and I absolutely agree. And why is that? Is because Cameron is merciless. And it
Yes.
seems like his early days, everyone hated him for being merciless, but I think he just like set the bar for quality like beyond like the horizon, and he pushes everyone to reach this limit. And this like bar for this Avatar, Way of Water, they had to train all actors to hold their breath underwater. They had a 7-year-old kid who was trained to hold his breath underwater.
And Kate Winslet broke the record, just putting it out there.
I think that there is definitely an amount of cis white male privilege that is going on with the amount that James Cameron can get his budgets greenlit at. Whereas you look at other directors who don't get as big a budget.
Christina Hodson.
Yeah.
Why does he get rewarded for using so many visual gags? I don't know what it is, but like I said, I'm a big fan of Robert Zemeckis. His latest films have just been bashed by critics.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, that is so true.
Is James Cameron paying Hollywood to do this?
What Avatar was, first Avatar, it was a technological breakthrough, and it was built as such in the US and around the world. I was in China when it first came out. Chinese freaked out how far they were ahead. So Avatar had like this like strong psychological effect that reestablished Hollywood superiority around the world. So that's why he keeps like getting those big budgets. He's not paying Hollywood. Hollywood is paying him because he became this kind of like technological icon.
I think people have good memories of him. And I was like 10 or something when I saw the first Avatar. It was the first IMAX 3D thing. We didn't have an IMAX theater near us. We drove, and they were like, oh, there's this new technology that we can only go see 2 hours from here, so it's got to be exclusive. And it just kind of created this big thing, and now everyone's like, oh, I remember that being fun, and they'll just watch anything that he makes.
People are still watching it no matter what others are saying about it, and I feel like that's a big reason he keeps getting rewarded.
It sounds like we've had a lot of things to say about the technical visual aspects, and of course we do, because that is what James Cameron leans on. I think he has a very visual mind. I think that when he goes into a project, he thinks about what's it going to look like, what's going to look really cool, what's something that someone hasn't done before that I want to get credit for doing. But when you get into the nitty gritty and when you think about the storytelling that's in his stuff, the amount that the person who was explaining the plot to me said somehow and apparently, whenever they were talking about the transitional aspect of the first movie into this one and how different things have happened with the characters, what I see in that is that he doesn't respect his audience. He's like, the audience will just buy whatever I give them as long as it looks pretty and it's in a pretty package. He's recycling storylines. He's resurrecting characters who died in the first one just so that he doesn't have to come up with a new storyline or a new character. That makes me, as someone who is a consumer of art, feel like I'm not being respected. So I've taken us into a slightly negative route here, but I would love to hear other people's thoughts. Do you feel like you kind of got cheated as an audience member?
I'm gonna presume you're talking about Sigourney Weaver's character here specifically. Her character has got no genuine backstory there. And there are quite a few spaced out moments in the film where they are telling us that there's a backstory that probably exists. But it's always a teaser. Like, he keeps telling us, okay, there's a story that you need to know. And then he's like, no, you don't need to know. There's a moment where she connects with the tree that's like the root of their culture, I guess, underwater. She has a seizure and she has a lot of like memories coming back and visions. And it is never talked about. Except to use it as an excuse to limit her freedom.
Something we have to remember is James Cameron planned for 5 movies.
Yep.
That man like films like 6 hours of stuff and then cuts it down. So I feel like a lot of the stuff that we feel like we're missing, he was just like, oh, I'll do it in the next one, because he's like, yeah, I got like 3 more of these.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying I feel like that's what he's thinking.
If that was really the case, we could have boiled it down to 2 hours. We really did not need a 90-minute filler first half. Nothing
But the
genuinely
whales.
happens in terms of. But the whales, I know, but the whales.
The thing is that psychologically, I mean, he's at the end of his career. Now he's kind of like a king. He's
Yeah.
the king. He doesn't need to make an effort because he could have supported young filmmakers, you know, independent filmmakers. He could have launched himself into something else. But I think now he's kind of like he's put on a pedestal, and that's why he's not making any efforts. I think he will be just like drifting, doing those Avatar movies, and because they take a lot of efforts, and he would be just running this multi-million-dollar machine until he just retires.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to talk about supporting, like, for example, Scorsese, he has been producing so many independent movies as a. But if you're going to see the producer slate of James Cameron too, right? He really doesn't go out of his way to support people with his with the position that he carved out for himself. He's not trying to make it easier for others, and I don't know.
And
I don't feel good
I want
about
to
that.
I want to kind of segue into that, because I think that one of the things that if you have that kind of cred and you have that kind of budget, you have the space to be able to think about inclusion in your storytelling, hiring people who actually have the experience that you're drawing from. So let's talk a little bit about the Indigenous culture and representation, or lack thereof, that is in this story, and why so many people are boycotting this film because of that.
I think Yusuf should go first since you attended the Q&A. Would you mind? Would you want to tell us about your experience there?
So it's James Cameron and the other four writers on stage. They spent 6 months writing all the sequel movies, and so
6 months.
So they it was ran like a writer's room, but they talked about how they had a ton of books with thousands of pages on indigenous cultures around the world, and they spent like days just reading through these, researching, and see where they could pull the cultures from and then apply it to these movies. So obviously, Avatar 2, the new culture or the new indigenous tribe they met, is obviously based on the Maori tribe. And I guess one good thing about that tribe is they had Cliff Curtis play the tribal leader, who's an actual Maori. He's from a Maori tribe in New Zealand. So we got that.
One.
But his wife's Kate Winslet, so.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that he openly admits that this is inspired by like that Burroughs kind of Tarzan, Man on Mars kind of storytelling, where like you just take the white guy and he goes to the place with the the foreigners, the indigenous people, whatever you want to call it, and he's only there for a few months, but he's going to lead them into battle, and the whole story could have been told with an indigenous leader who did the same things as the guy, but we can't have that. We have to plop him in here and make him the leader. And it's just like, of course, his storytelling has issues. It's from a problematic past where we don't tell those kind of stories anymore. We don't think Dune is this like super awesome story. We understand it as kind of a white savior complex. And he specifically said, I wanted a male hero who kicked ass like the stories from the 50s and the 60s. And it's just weird that like there's all this boycott from indigenous groups and the Maori themselves. And like I didn't even know about it till I searched on the internet. Like it's not on the news. No one's talking about it. It's just the movie is amazing. So I mean,
we could get into like the xenophobia and all of that stuff that like indigenous cultures just like don't even have very much media attention at all, and they really should. And we could really get into that on here if we wanted to, but that's not what today is about. Whenever you do something that's sci-fi and you're like, we're going to do aliens, but there's always social commentary in sci-fi. So I feel like he's like, well, if they're blue, where it's not really a white savior complex because he's this. It's like,
that's kind of exactly what he did there. I mean, you don't have to go far. You had Zoe Saldana playing his wife right beside him. And let's not forget, she was a warrior. She was meant to become their spiritual leader.
It bugs me so much learning that Neytiri doesn't really have a very big role in this, because she could have been like the new leader of the tribe. Like that was like where she was headed in the first one. They decided not to do that. And
because it's not just xenophobic, it's also like intensely patriarchal, because there are moments where Jake Sully keeps repeating this like catchphrase. This is what gives a father his purpose. A father's role is to protect. I mean, like, I get that. I'm not gonna be like hating against that because that is true. I understand that he wants to give Jake Sully his own role.
Sure.
But why is that the center? Why is that the main story that we're trying to tell? Zoe is actually going through a much bigger crisis of faith because she's having to abandon her family. The entire tribe who she grew up with, she has to leave them on the word of a white man who came and somehow is a better, he's more Navi than the actual Navis. And I don't know why that's the story we're telling in 2022.
I think the answer to it is the fact that James Cameron's personal philosophy and worldview permeates like everything. He can do all research possible in the world on indigenous tribes. They will still like be secondary actors, secondary characters. Who are the main characters? It's Jake Sully, a white man who is now having like midlife crisis as a Navi. So, and against him is the Colonel Roach, who is also now like kind of like an avatar or whatever. So it's basically like two white men.
Yep.
Still sorting out their relationship, but like in the galaxy far, far away.
Yep.
So who is in the background? Whether they're blue, whether they swim in the water, and inspired by Maori, or they're inspired by tribes in Indonesia, it doesn't matter. It's still two white men, like figuring out who is the alpha. That's it.
Yeah, like this could have happened in a dining room at America. They wouldn't have to go across the world at Pandora, wage war, and
or, you know, in a Western in the 50s.
This is insider that Europe equals Earth. The Native Americans are Navi. It's not meant to be subtle, but he's literally like, well, yeah, in the movie, Europe equals Earth. Like, that's literally his statement, his philosophy. Like you said, what permeates his storytelling.
How upsetting is it that James Cameron can basically just blatantly say, I did this, and everyone's like, we're still going to go watch the movie. We're still going to support you. We're still going to give you the budget. That is precisely what I was
talking about. He can mess up, but we'll still give him money. And that is what like really annoys me, because we don't give new filmmakers that same grace.
It's the curiosity, though, because all of us are like, what is he doing still? Like, how is this going to go? Because I don't see how this is going to keep going. So I want to see it.
Realize, right? Sure. Like, we are keeping him relevant by questioning his relevance. Like,
that's a lot of filmmakers, honestly, like the big ones, especially the older ones, because we're all like, they're like, they blew up in the 80s. What are they doing now? Like, is it bad? Is it good? Let's see. Like, and that's the only reason why a lot of people are seeing it.
Exactly, and that's why like a huge film happened called The Woman King, but it did not get like half the spotlight it deserves.
I'm surprised it took you this long to talk about The Woman King, Troy.
Yeah, I was keeping it in. And I didn't want like an
You got Christina Hodson in there, but you didn't get The Woman King in there yet.
Yeah, I haven't, because like, again, I mean, the difference between what they did there and here is, firstly, all Black women in charge. Like, they are talking about their own story, and yet it's actually written by people who went to the places, talked to the women who like, they're not African Americans, they're actual African people who are there. Gina Prince Bythewood, right? She didn't just research through books. She actually talked to people involved. She's the director, not the screenwriter. And the screenwriter has spent years researching about this, doing interviews, doing surveys, and creating this.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like they're actually bashing the very existence of male characters there. They're not doing that. They're just upholding the story of these women. And that is precisely what's wrong here, because he doesn't just uphold Jake Sully's story, he actually makes Neytiri irrelevant. And the fact is, like, if you knew Neytiri, you understand the kind of mother she'd be. And she's not given that space to play out the role that she would as a mother in respect to the older stories.
The biggest problem with the Zoe Saldana's character is that she's very one note, right? Like, we talked about how she like lost her home, but the entire time of the movie, she's just like, we should fight. We should fight. We should fight. Okay, we're fighting. Now I'm a pissed off woman. You know, it's like there is a deeper story there, but James Cameron isn't exploring it because he doesn't care as much about that as he does about Jake Sully. Yeah, I mean, like,
because he thinks feminism is taking a 6 months pregnant woman into war. He literally said that.
There was a huge focus on the children, right? And that's what the movie wanted to focus on, is on the children. Problem is like, You know, how many of them are women, right? Just the one.
Yeah, but there's a
Just that-
daughter and two sons, and the daughter story is the one that's least significant, like least well written.
You got the Sigourney Weaver one, and the one that's
Oh,
like
yeah,
four,
exactly.
the comedic
Exactly.
relief.
See, I even forgot that there's another daughter. That's how forgettably. So, yeah.
And then
And
there's
there's
the
this
water tribe daughter who's just a love interest.
Yeah.
gives us this concept of feminism that Kate Winslet playing a 6-month pregnant lady going into war is so progressive and so feminist. But her entire reason for going to war is that her daughter got abducted. But there is not a moment in the entire 1 hour climax where you see her actually fighting, looking for her daughter, even like meeting her daughter. Her daughter does not go to her. Her daughter has not a single scene with her. He just completely forgets that these women are there. They have dialogues, they have significance.
He loves to laud himself for being a feminist, though.
Mm.
Yeah, if you look up feminism and Avatar the Way of Water, which I did because I was researching about this, 80% of the results that come on the first 4 pages are headlined James Cameron lauds Avatar Way of Water for being feminist. It is your movie, can you not?
His understanding of feminism is like a strong woman who can kick ass. Like that's why he liked Sigourney Weaver. He had a certain like physical
Brand
type
of feminism,
that
yeah.
he prefers, and he shows it in the movies, and that's his understanding of feminism.
Yep.
The dumbest thing he did in that movie was, who was the little white boy that was painting himself
Yes.
blue? Random.
Oh my god, I
Spider.
was gonna come to that.
Oh,
Spider.
that, yeah.
I
was
wish we would talk about him more because I hate him.
Can we
That's
talk
like-
about Spider,
Yeah.
actually? Can we talk about Spider, please?
That's
For me.
appropriation at its finest. I was like, Wigga, please. Like, we
Yes. He didn't even bother to make him blue. Like,
Nope.
My gosh.
shut the fuck up. Like, who is this little white boy that they just like shoehorned into the
He's just to keep the plot going, and like for some reason he saves his dad because it's his dad when he was never
oh
like
my
a
God.
father figure to him
Again,
at all. So, like, why
somehow,
did you do that?
apparently. Why don't we deserve more than that?
and he's
So
he's
bad.
gonna use the same damaged guy as the villain of the third
For the
film.
next one.
And also,
I
like,
was
the
okay
amount
with
of
him
macho
twice,
amount.
not more.
Exactly. And the amount of toxic masculinity there. The first thing that the Navi villain does when he lands on the planet is find the dead body of his human form, pick up the skull and crush it.
like Hamlet.
Like, what are we supposed to feel about him from that? Like, I don't.
It's
just
Emotion
one-
that you don't know what it is.
It is visually appealing for a trailer.
Is it? Like, I was turned off. Like, if I'd seen the trailer, I would probably be even more skeptical about it.
But
Well,
James Cameron, he has a soft spot for like young white men, you know. He made DiCaprio into a star, and he just needed to insert one white handsome
Yeah, the
guy
spider.
like Spider into this film.
On the James Cameron, especially the Leo DiCaprio thing, just as like a final thing here.
Yeah,
Apparently,
the
Leo
20th
DiCaprio like
anniversary.
turned down Titanic initially, and James Cameron is like, I had to convince him to be in this, and now he's this big star. Like Leo DiCaprio wasn't
God.
going to do this movie, but because I made him do it, he did it, and now like
He
basically like
was a
Leo
star,
DiCaprio owes his
though.
career to me is basically what he's saying. I'm just like, oh my gosh, James Cameron, your movie just made $2 billion. Why can't you just be happy for a second and not have
He
to,
was
like-
he was already on the map because of Basketball Diaries. Like,
And What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
yeah,
what's
he
eating
was
Gilbert Grape?
already
What's eating
places.
Gilbert? Exactly. What's eating Gilbert Grape? Precisely.
I know.
Like, why is this guy so full of himself? That's my biggest
That's
criticism.
the
I
tagline
guess.
of this whole
That
thing.
is
Why
the
is this guy
final
so
thought
full?
we need. The final.
Yeah, like, why is he so full of himself?
You have 2 billion reasons why he's
He
so
does,
full
yep.
of
Yeah, that
himself.
is true. That
does
is true.
now.
I mean, no matter how much you do, I don't think you ever earn the right to be that full of yourself. So yeah, not really.
I mean, I agree. And I feel like there are people who could be full of themselves, who are very, very talented, who are very humble. And that's why I'm like, let's
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
give them the budgets because they will use them in a way that helps other people.
Exactly. And can I just like add to that point? You know, you mentioned like the independent movies that he produced. I watched Sanctum because I wanted to see what kind of like movies James Cameron produces. And it was just like basically like the recreation of an earlier James Cameron.
That is what I was talking about.
It was a story about like father and son conflict, and then like how they solve it, like in the underwater caves using James Cameron technology to film it. There was no interest in anything else but like exactly this like very narrow worldview, like okay, like a white man and his problems.
If you consider Martin Scorsese, for example, he produced The Souvenir by Johanna Hogg, Pieces of a Woman starring Vanessa Kirby. He produced Marina. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a foreign film that came out last year. Like, he diversifies, and he's actually using the platform he has developed for himself to help out. But James Cameron is like, okay, maybe I can't make all the movies I wanted to, so I'm going to help others who are making the same movie I wanted to. Like, no, not a fan.
Yeah. I feel like we were actually nicer to James Cameron on this than I thought we would be, because we spent so much time talking about all the technology stuff, but that's how it went. That's how it went today. This is the first one of these. Hopefully we'll do some more if people like this one. I hope everybody
something positive, like Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn.
Does anybody have like a final thought?
No more white savior stories. That's my
No more white savior stories, yes.
Especially white male saviors.
Yeah.
And more female centric too, exactly. Yeah.
Like how about actual feminism rather than gestural feminism? That'd be nice.
I think I want to end by telling everyone who hasn't seen it, go watch The Woman King if you're seeing this video and you haven't watched it. Yeah.
All right. So if everybody wants to comment and kind of start a conversation down there, like obviously this is something we all have a lot of opinions about. So I know I'll be looking at the comments and engaging with people.
Feel free to oppose us.
Yeah, please. I love hearing other people's thoughts, because to me, it's better to have like a more well-rounded something. Like if I wasn't so personally opposed to seeing this film for all the reasons we kind of talked about, I would have seen it so that I could come in with a more like well-researched way of looking at it, so I could really talk about the nitty-gritty. But yeah, I just didn't want to financially support this one. So
I support you on that.
Thank you. But yeah, please comment, and we're trying to figure out what we want to do for the next discussion. So if you have something that you want us to talk about, we can kind of look at those suggestions. And yeah, all right, we're done.
Bye.
All right,
bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.